Hello, my amazing children. This is Grandma Carla, and I am back with Pippi Longstocking, and we're reading Chapter 3. Pippi plays tag with the police. Soon, everyone in that little town knew that a 9-year-old girl was living alone in Villa Vellicula. The grown-ups in town, both the men and the women, did not approve in the least. All children needed to have someone to scold them, and all children needed to go to school and learn the multiplication tables. And that's why all of the grown-ups decided that the little girl in Villa Vellicula should be sent to a children's home at once. One beautiful afternoon, Pippi had invited Tommy and Annika to come over for coffee and ginger snaps. She had set out a coffee tray on the porch steps. It was sunny and lovely out there, and all of the flowers in Pippi's garden were so fragrant. Mr. Nielsen kept climbing around on the porch railing, and now and then the horse would stick out his nose for a ginger snap. "Oh, how glorious it is to be alive," said Pippi, stretching out her legs as far as they would go. Right at the moment, 2 policemen in full uniform came striding through the gate. "Wow," said Pippi, "this must be another lucky day for me. Policemen are the best thing I can think of, except for rhubarb pudding, of course." And she walked over to greet the policeman, her face beaming with delight. "Are you the girl who's moved into Villa Vellicula?" asked one of the officers. "Far from it," said Pippi. "I'm a tiny little woman who lives in the 3rd-floor apartment at the other end of town." She just said this because she felt like teasing the policemen a little. But they didn't think it was the least bit funny. They said that she shouldn't try to be smart with them. And then they told her that all of the nice people in the town were making arrangements so that she could have a room at the children's home. "But I already live in a children's home," said Pippi. "What's that? Has it already been arranged?" asked one of the officers. "Where is this children's home?" "Here," said Pippi proudly. "I'm a child, and this is my home. So it's a children's home, and I have room here, plenty of room." "My dear child," said the policeman with a smile, "you don't understand. You have to go to a real children's home where somebody can look after you." "Are horses allowed in your children's home?" asked Pippi. "No, of course not," said the officer. "I was afraid of that," said Pippi, sounding gloomy. "Well, what about monkeys?" "Certainly not. I'm sure you realize that." "I see," said Pippi. "Then you're going to have to look somewhere else to find kids for your children's home. I have no intention of moving there." "Yes, but you don't realize that you have to go to school," said the policeman. "Why do I have to go to school?" "To learn things, of course." "What sorts of things?" asked Pippi. "All kinds of things," said the officer. "Lots of useful things, like the multiplication tables, for instance." "I've been fine for 9 years without any multiplication tables," said Pippi, "and I'm sure I can manage in the future, too." "Yes, but think how sad it will be for you to be so ignorant. What about when you grow up and someone happens to ask you what the capital of Portugal is, and you can't answer it?" "Of course I can answer," said Pippi. "I'll just answer like this. If you're so desperately anxious to know what the capital of Portugal is, then by all means write a letter to Portugal and ask them. But don't you think you'd feel silly that you couldn't answer the question yourself?" "That's possible. Occasionally I might lie awake at night and wonder over and over, what on earth is the capital of Portugal? But you can't expect that things will always be fun," said Pippi as she went into a handstand and stayed there for a moment. "Besides, I've been to Lisbon with my papa," and she went on as she stood upside down because that didn't stop her from talking. So here is Pippi upside down in a handstand while the policemen are standing there watching her. But then one of the officers said to Pippi certainly shouldn't go around thinking that she could do whatever she liked. She was going to have to come with them to the children's home, right then and there. He walked toward her and grabbed her by the arm, but Pippi quickly tore herself loose, gave him a light tap, and said, "You're it." Before he could even blink, she had leaped up onto the porch railing. With a couple of bounds, she was on the balcony above the porch. The policeman had no desire to climb up in that way. So they dashed inside the house and up to the 2nd floor. By the time that they came out into the balcony, Pippi was already halfway up to the roof. She climbed across the shingles as if she were a monkey. In a flash, she reached the ridge and then nimbly jumped up into the chimney. On the balcony below, the police officers were scratching their heads, and on the lawn stood Tommy and Annika peering up at Pippi. "This is so much fun playing tag," cried Pippi, "and it was nice of you to come to visit. This is my lucky day, I guess." After the policemen had pondered things for a moment, they went to get a ladder, which they propped against one end of the house. Then they climbed up, one after the other, planning to bring Pippi back down. But they looked a little scared as they climbed out onto the ridge of the roof and started teetering their way toward Pippi. "Don't be scared," called Pippi. "It's not dangerous, it's fun." When the policemen were within 2 paces of Pippi, she quickly hopped down from the chimney, and shrieking and laughing, she ran along the ridge to the other end of the house. A couple of yards from the house stood a tree. So here's the ladder that they had to climb up. "Now it's time for a dive," yelled Pippi, and then she jumped straight down into the green crown of the tree. She hung onto a branch, dangled back and forth for a moment, and then let herself drop to the ground. Then she darted over to the other end of the house and took away the ladder. The policemen stood a bit dismayed when Pippi jumped, but they were even more dismayed when they teetered their way back over to the ridge to climb down the ladder. At first they were terribly angry. They yelled at Pippi, who was standing down below, peering up at them. They told her to bring the ladder back at once, or she was going to be in real trouble. "Why are you so angry?" asked Pippi reproachfully. "We're just playing a game of tag. Why not be friends?" The officers thought about this for a moment, and at last one of them, sounding embarrassed, "Listen to me. Would you be kind enough to put back the ladder so that we can get down?" "Of course I will," said Pippi, and she instantly put back the ladder. "And then why don't we drink some coffee and have a nice time?" But those officers were awfully sly, because as soon as they reached the ground, they rushed at Pippi, shouting, "We're going to get you now, you horrid little beast." But then Pippi said, "No, I don't have time to play anymore, but it certainly has been fun. I'll admit that." And she took a firm grip on the belts of both policemen, and she carried them down the garden path, through the gate, and out to the street. There she set them down, and it took a long time for them to pull themselves together and get to their feet. "Wait a minute," called Pippi, and then she ran back into the kitchen. She came out with a couple of heart-shaped ginger snaps, and she said pleasantly, "Would you like one? You don't mind that they're a little burned, do you?" Then she went back to Tommy and Annika, who were standing there with their eyes wide, completely astonished. The policemen hurried back to town, and they told all the grown-ups, both men and women, that Pippi wasn't really suited to go to the children's home. They didn't mention that they had been up on the roof, and the grown-ups thought it might be best to allow Pippi to continue living at Villa Vellicula. If she wanted to go to school, then she could make her own arrangements. But Pippi and Tommy and Annika had a very pleasant afternoon. They went back to their coffee party, which had been interrupted. Pippi devoured 14 ginger snaps, and then she said, "Those two were not my idea of what real policemen should look like. Not at all. Far too much talk about children's homes and Lisbon and plutification tables." Afterward, she lifted the horse down from the porch, and all 3 of them went for a ride. At first, Annika was scared and didn't want to go, but when she saw how much fun Tommy and Pippi were having, she let Pippi lift her up on the horse's back, and the horse trotted around and around in the garden while Tommy sang, "Here Come the Swedes," with a clatter and a clang. After Tommy and Annika had crawled into bed that evening, Tommy said, "Annika, don't you think it's great that Pippi moved here?" "Of course I do," said Annika. "I can't even remember what games we used to play before she came here, can you?" We played croquet and things like that," said Annika, "but I think it's much more fun with Pippi and with the horse and everything else." So here's a picture of them all trotting off on the horse. And that is the end of chapter 3. And this is Grandma Carla, and I love you.